Sheikh Khalid Al Mansoor and Jessica Moore's paths crossed in Houston. But what began as a chance encounter between a wealthy Dubai businessman and a charming Texan woman quickly spiraled into a deadly game of greed, manipulation, and murder that would shock the world. In the quiet suburbs of Houston, Texas, Sheikh Khalid Al Mansoor's arrival caused a subtle stir. At 56 years old, he was no ordinary visitor. He was a man whose name resonated in the luxury and oil industries of Dubai. His fortune was the stuff of legends, built over decades through shrewd investments, oil ventures, and real estate developments. Yet, despite his immense wealth, Khalid had chosen to move far from the glittering towers of the Middle East to the calm streets of Texas, a decision that baffled some and intrigued others. The mansion he purchased was enormous, with tall gates, manicured lawns, and security systems that seemed to hint at his cautious nature. To neighbors, it was the home of a mysterious figure, a man of power who moved silently through the world, yet left a lingering presence wherever he went. Friends who knew him described Khalid as disciplined and careful, always calculating, someone who trusted few and guarded his fortune fiercely. But this carefulness did not extend to personal relationships, and his decision to socialize in Houston introduced him to people whose intentions were far from pure. The local community saw a man who seemed to glide effortlessly between cultures, carrying the aura of Dubai's elite, but enjoying the simplicity of suburban life. Despite the outward calm, Khalid was not naive. He understood the risks of being wealthy in a foreign country, yet he did not anticipate the danger lurking behind a seemingly harmless encounter. His life, which had been so structured and secure, was about to be disrupted by someone who saw his fortune not as a symbol of achievement, but as a target. In this quiet neighborhood, beneath the sun-soaked streets and manicured gardens, the first threads of a deadly plan were silently being woven. Jessica Moore's life had been a series of struggles masked by charm and ambition. At 32, she had grown accustomed to scraping by, working odd jobs that barely covered rent and bills. Her beauty and charisma allowed her to move through social circles with ease, but behind the smiles and laughter was a calculated mind always searching for opportunities. Jessica had learned early that wealth could open doors she would never reach otherwise, and she had developed a reputation for finding ways into the lives of rich men, extracting favors, gifts, and sometimes much more. When news of Sheikh Khalid Al Mansoor's arrival in Houston reached her, she saw a golden opportunity, one that could elevate her life in a single, decisive move. Unlike others who admired Khalid from afar, Jessica began studying him closely. She learned about his habits, his routines, even the names of his employees. She watched videos, read articles, and pieced together a picture of a man both powerful and, perhaps, vulnerable in a new city. Her plan was methodical. It wasn't enough to simply meet him. She needed to become indispensable, someone he trusted implicitly. Slowly, she inserted herself into his social life, attending events where he would be present, crafting chance encounters that seemed natural. She cultivated the image of an innocent woman, curious and interested in learning about his world, all the while assessing how she could access his wealth. Jessica's mind worked like a predator stalking prey, calculating each move and contingency. She imagined the life she could have with Khalid's fortune, luxury cars, designer clothes, lavish trips, and freedom from the constraints that had defined her past. But ambition, when mixed with cunning and desperation, can easily spiral into darkness. Jessica's intentions, initially cloaked in charm and fascination, were gradually transforming into a plan that would cross the line from manipulation to murder. Jessica Moore's careful planning finally paid off when she managed to meet Sheikh Khalid at a private party hosted by a Houston businessman known for entertaining international clients. The event was exclusive, filled with people who mingled effortlessly in high society. Yet Jessica moved through the crowd with the precision of someone on a mission. She presented herself as curious and charming, showing interest in Khalid's work and life in Dubai, while subtly dropping hints that made him feel both admired and understood. To Khalid, she appeared as a breath of fresh air, a companion who brought a sense of ease to a world often filled with opportunists and strangers. Her presence at the party did not go unnoticed. She lingered just long enough to make an impression, never appearing overeager, and left with the kind of enigmatic aura that made people want to know more. Within weeks, Jessica had secured multiple invitations to Khalid's mansion, each visit carefully orchestrated to appear casual yet strategic. She asked questions about his travels, complimented his taste in art and furniture, and expressed admiration for his achievements. While Khalid saw only an engaging and intelligent woman, Jessica's mind was occupied with the details that mattered most: security systems, financial documents, and potential vulnerabilities. She made careful notes on routines: when Khalid ate, when he entertained guests, and the times he preferred solitude. Neighbors began to notice her frequent visits, assuming it was a budding romance, but no one suspected the darker intentions behind her smiles. Jessica's calculated charm allowed her to navigate the world of the wealthy with ease, making herself indispensable without ever appearing threatening. Each step she took drew her closer to her ultimate goal, and Khalid remained unaware that his growing trust in her would soon become the key that unlocked a deadly chain of events. As Jessica Moore spent more time around Sheikh Khalid, her obsession with his wealth intensified. Every interaction was an opportunity to gather information, to learn about the properties he owned, the bank accounts he maintained, and the deals he was negotiating. She began to blur the lines between charm and manipulation, presenting herself as a trusted friend while secretly probing for weaknesses in his financial defenses. Khalid, though careful in business, allowed himself to let his guard down in her presence. He enjoyed the company, the attention, and the sense of companionship she offered in a foreign land. Jessica's schemes expanded beyond simple observation. She forged documents to test the limits of access to Khalid's properties, creating fake emails and letters to see how employees would respond. She even approached Daniel Hayes, Khalid's trusted attorney, under the guise of needing advice on legal matters, attempting to extract sensitive information. Daniel, a cautious and meticulous professional, grew uneasy as her questions became more probing. He began to sense that her intentions were not innocent, but Khalid's trust in her shielded her from scrutiny. Meanwhile, Omar Rahman, Khalid's security manager, also noticed irregularities. Jessica's late-night visits, her lingering interest in private areas of the mansion, and her subtle attempts to gain access to security codes made him uneasy. He discreetly documented her behavior, unsure whether to intervene or alert Khalid directly. Despite these warning signs, Jessica's ability to weave a convincing persona kept her one step ahead. She smiled, laughed, and made casual conversation, all while carefully mapping Khalid's world. Her obsession had evolved into something darker than ambition. She no longer saw Khalid as a person but as a means to an end, a gateway to unimaginable wealth. Every action she took, every subtle manipulation, brought her closer to the moment when her plans would escalate from deceit to violence. In her mind, the path to fortune justified any measure, no matter how sinister. By late summer, Jessica Moore's patience had worn thin. Months of carefully studying Sheikh Khalid's habits, observing his security measures, and probing for access to his wealth had produced little progress. The property laws and financial safeguards surrounding his assets were stronger than she had anticipated. What once seemed like a game of charm and manipulation now felt like a trap she could not escape without drastic action. Greed had overtaken caution, and her ambitions grew dangerously unchecked. Jessica began to meticulously plan a way to remove Khalid from the equation entirely. She observed his daily routines with precision, noting the times he dined alone, the nights he stayed late at the office, and the moments when his security team's attention was divided. She experimented with subtle manipulations to test his responses, all while maintaining the appearance of a devoted and harmless companion. Every detail mattered, from the placement of his glassware to the timing of his medication, as she mapped out the opportunity that could turn her dreams into reality. One evening, under the guise of a casual visit, Jessica prepared Khalid's drink with a lethal substance she had acquired discreetly. She positioned herself to appear as a concerned and caring presence, offering comfort and attention while ensuring the poison would take effect. Khalid, unsuspecting, sipped the drink, unaware that it contained the very element that would end his life. As he collapsed, Jessica's heart raced, a mixture of fear and exhilaration flooding her senses. She knew that the next hours would determine whether her plan succeeded or failed. In the silence of the mansion, the consequences of greed became starkly real. Khalid's life, built over decades of careful work and strategic decisions, was extinguished in a single, calculated act. Jessica, who had once relied on charm and deception, now faced the immediate reality of murder, a line crossed that could never be undone. The quiet streets of Houston, once a backdrop for ambition and opportunity, had become the stage for a shocking and irreversible crime. Panic surged through Jessica more the moment Sheikh Khalid collapsed. The gravity of what she had done pressed down on her, but instinct and calculation quickly took over. She realized that if she left the scene as it was, suspicion would immediately fall on her. Every second counted, and she needed to create the illusion of an accidental death. She carefully arranged Khalid's body in a recliner, placing a few scattered pill bottles and an empty glass nearby to suggest a sudden heart attack or a fatal overdose. Every detail had to look natural, as though he had simply succumbed to the stresses of life or an unforeseen health issue. Once the initial scene was staged, Jessica turned her attention to the more tangible prize, Khalid's wealth. She knew that documents proving ownership of his properties, bank accounts, and investment assets were stored in his study. Entering the room, she rifled through folders and locked drawers, carefully selecting papers that could help her access his fortune. She copied keys to luxury vehicles, snapped photos of legal documents, and transferred files to her phone. Each action was performed with meticulous caution, yet the adrenaline of the moment made her movements tense and hurried. What Jessica did not anticipate was the security system installed by Omar Rahman, Khalid's vigilant security manager. Small, discreet cameras captured her every move, recording her presence in the study and the actions she took with the documents. While she believed she had orchestrated the perfect crime, the digital evidence was silently documenting her misdeeds. By the time Jessica left the mansion, she had constructed a convincing facade of innocence, but the invisible eye of surveillance had begun to trace her path. Her manipulation of the scene and theft of documents had been precise, yet she had unknowingly set the stage for her downfall. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and opportunity, had now become the scene of a carefully recorded crime that would soon unravel her carefully crafted plan. The following morning, Omar Rahman arrived at Sheikh Khalid's mansion, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded hours earlier. He had grown accustomed to the predictable rhythm of Khalid's daily life, and the silence that greeted him that morning immediately set off alarm bells. As he entered the house, he found Khalid slumped in the recliner, lifeless, the carefully staged scene surrounding him. Panic and disbelief rippled through Omar's mind. This was not an ordinary medical emergency. Something felt deeply wrong. He quickly contacted authorities, providing them with all the details of Khalid's routines, the security measures in place, and the list of people who had been in contact with him over the previous days. Jessica Moore arrived shortly after, presenting herself as a distraught companion. She feigned grief with practiced precision, tears welling in her eyes as she expressed shock at Khalid's sudden death. Her performance initially seemed convincing, but the investigators were trained to notice inconsistencies. Small details, the timing of her visits, the questions she asked, and her unusual familiarity with certain parts of the mansion did not align with the behavior of someone genuinely grieving. Daniel Hayes, Khalid's attorney, became a critical figure in the unfolding investigation. He revealed that Jessica had been pressing him for details about Khalid's properties and had shown unusual interest in transferring assets. Her attempts to extract confidential information suddenly took on a sinister context, casting doubt on her intentions. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Khalid's death was not a simple heart attack or accidental overdose. Toxicology reports revealed traces of poison in his system, transforming a tragic incident into a suspected homicide. The authorities began to view Jessica not as a grieving companion, but as a calculated intruder whose charm had masked deadly intentions. The luxurious mansion, once a symbol of Khalid's success, had become a crime scene, and the carefully constructed web of deceit Jessica had spun was beginning to unravel under the scrutiny of law enforcement. The investigation into Sheikh Khalid's death intensified as detectives meticulously examined every detail of the mansion and its surroundings. Surveillance footage, which Jessica Moore had believed was unnoticed, became the turning point in the case. Grainy but unmistakable, the videos showed her entering the mansion late at night, moving with purpose through private areas, and handling documents she had no legitimate reason to access. Investigators matched these movements against Khalid's timeline, and the inconsistencies were impossible to ignore. What had seemed like an accident was now clearly a premeditated act. Forensic teams analyzed Khalid's body, confirming that poison had been the cause of death. The substance was rare and not easily traceable, indicating that the perpetrator had some knowledge of toxicology or had taken the time to research lethal methods. The discovery shocked the local community, who had seen Jessica as a charming visitor and assumed she posed no threat. Her carefully constructed persona of innocence began to crumble under the weight of evidence, revealing the cold calculation behind her actions. Meanwhile, detectives delved into Jessica's personal life, uncovering a disturbing pattern of manipulation and opportunism. They discovered searches on her phone and computer for topics such as forging legal documents, hiding stolen assets, and methods of bypassing security systems. It became apparent that her plan to gain access to Khalid's wealth had been methodically developed over months, leaving a digital trail that no one could ignore. Daniel Hayes and Omar Rahman played critical roles in piecing together the puzzle. Daniel provided testimony regarding Jessica's pressure tactics to obtain confidential information, while Omar confirmed the timeline of her suspicious visits and highlighted her attempts to bypass security. The authorities realized that Jessica's greed had driven her to cross every moral and legal boundary, and her attempts to mask her actions were futile. Every move she had made to steal Khalid's fortune had been recorded, documented, and analyzed, leaving her with little hope of evading justice. The arrest of Jessica Moore was swift once the evidence against her became overwhelming. Detectives tracked her movements after leaving Sheikh Khalid's mansion and found her attempting to sell one of his luxury vehicles through a private dealer. The dealer, suspicious of the unusual circumstances surrounding the sale, alerted the authorities. When police arrived, Jessica was caught red-handed, holding the keys to a car that clearly did not belong to her. Her calm and composed exterior, which had allowed her to manipulate those around her, finally cracked under the scrutiny of law enforcement. During the pre-trial investigation, prosecutors meticulously built their case. The combination of surveillance footage, digital records, and forensic evidence painted a chilling portrait of a woman who had planned a murder to seize wealth. Every action she had taken, from poisoning Khalid's drink to stealing sensitive documents, was documented and verifiable. Experts testified to the premeditated nature of the crime, emphasizing the calculated steps she had taken to cover her tracks. Daniel Hayes, Khalid's attorney, provided critical testimony, detailing Jessica's attempts to pressure him into transferring property and providing sensitive financial information. His statements revealed her persistence and the lengths she had gone to infiltrate Khalid's life. Omar Rahman, the security manager, corroborated the timeline, showing how Jessica had exploited blind spots in the mansion's security and moved through private areas without permission. The evidence left little room for doubt. This was not a crime of passion or desperation, but a cold, calculated act of greed. The trial became a media sensation, with news outlets covering every detail of the shocking murder. Jessica's manipulations, once hidden behind charm and charisma, were laid bare in the courtroom. The jury was faced with undeniable proof of her intentions and actions, and her attempts to feign innocence and grief failed completely. It became evident to everyone that her life of deception had led to an inevitable and damning conclusion. The sentencing of Jessica Moore marked the final chapter in the tragic story of Sheikh Khalid Al Mansoor. After weeks of courtroom proceedings, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder and multiple counts of fraud and theft. Jessica's calculated charm and manipulations, which had allowed her to infiltrate Khalid's life and commit the crime, were finally exposed for what they truly were. The life she had imagined, filled with wealth, luxury, and freedom, crumbled in a single moment as the judge pronounced her sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The case sent shockwaves across Houston and beyond, drawing attention from international media due to Khalid's high-profile background. Experts and commentators discussed the dangers of greed and manipulation, analyzing how Jessica's calculated actions had escalated from opportunism to murder. Families and neighbors who had once admired Khalid's wealth and influence now grappled with the brutal reality that his life had been taken in a scheme born of deceit and ambition. For Daniel Hayes, Khalid's attorney, the aftermath was bittersweet. He continued to manage the late Sheikh's properties, ensuring that Khalid's investments remained secure despite the disruption caused by Jessica's crimes. Omar Rahman returned to Dubai with Khalid's family, carrying the heavy burden of witnessing the betrayal and the tragic loss of a man he had protected for years. Both men were left to reconcile the shocking events with their own sense of duty and responsibility, forever marked by the crime. As for Jessica, her plans for a life of opulence were replaced with the stark reality of confinement. Her actions, once cloaked in charm and intelligence, had resulted in a prison cell and a public record of her crimes. The mansion, the stolen documents, and the vehicles were all reclaimed, leaving her with nothing. In the end, her ambition and greed had achieved nothing but destruction, proving that the pursuit of wealth at any cost can lead to irreversible consequences. Khalid's legacy endured, but the story of betrayal and murder remained a chilling reminder of human vulnerability and the dark extremes of desire.